Hey fellow Trek Chatters, I'm Pit Trekkie and welcome to another episode of Pittsburgh's Trek Chat. So for today's episode, what I'm going to be doing is reviewing episode 10 of season 2 of Star Trek Picard, Farewell, which is the season finale for season 2. So basically the episode starts at the house. Rios is talking with Picard and company about the Renee prophecy, about how there are going to be two different Renees, one that lives, one that dies, and how that's even possible. The crew go to Talon's apartment. Rios, Rafi, and 7 and 9 are able to use some sort of GPS to locate where Dr. Soong's home is. They plan on going there and trying to stop whatever he has planned to sabotage the Europa mission. Talon plans to go to the rocket launch for the Europa mission to make sure that she gets on board and goes on her mission without Soong or Q stopping. Talon says she's going to go alone, but she ends up going, and Picard grabs onto her and he gets transported over there with her. They get to the launch site. They argue a little bit because Picard knows that this is basically a one-way mission for Talon, that she's going to die, and he's not going to let that happen. She gets mad at him, basically says that no matter what, despite what's happened to him in the past, he doesn't get to control who lives or who dies at this point. 7 and 9, Rios and Rafi end up getting to Dr. Soong's house. They hear his voice counting down to the rocket launch, but they find out that it's actually a computerized voice, and when they contact Picard about him not being there, Picard sees that Soong is actually at the rocket launch at this point. They find some sort of heat signature in Soong's house, and they find 4 drones that are apparently meant to destroy the rocket that Renee is boarding. So they work on trying to stop those. At that point, Talon ends up donning somebody's uniform and getting into being able to see Renee. She has a little bit of a heart-to-heart with Renee. Renee kind of is upset at first, saying, "I don't know who you are, but yet you seem somewhat familiar." And we find out that Talon was present when Renee's mother had died, and she had placed a little rocket, a little shuttle rocket in her casket, saying that she felt that if she went out into space and into the stars far enough that she would actually find her mother somewhere. She was also present when Renee was at Martha's Vineyard, and she was on a boat, and the boat collapsed and almost killed her. And they actually met face-to-face at that point, and Talon gave her a little sailboat necklace, which Renee still had, that she had with her. At this point, it kind of disappears. We kind of go on to Soong. Soong is actually at the base. He's being toured as a VIP. He starts getting very irritable with the woman who's been talking him up, basically, because he's a VIP. And he claims he wants to see the astronauts, but the woman on the tour with him says that they're in the middle of getting ready to board. Soong gets mad and ends up leaving the group. At this point, Soong is coming out through the hallway, and he sees Renee coming out saying, "Dr. Soong, there's a mad woman in my chambers here. She's saying she knows me. Please keep me safe." So Soong walks away with her, and as they're walking through the complex, Renee starts to get sick and fall ill. Dr. Soong peels off this piece of fake skin that apparently had a neurotoxin, and he walks away and leaves Renee for dead. Around this point, Rios and Rafi are trying to get control of these drones, but apparently there was some sort of bomb that was rigged to go off if it had been tampered with. Somehow Rafi is able to get past that bomb. The drones get launched. Rafi helps to finally get Rios to have manual control of the drones, and he crashes the main one into the other 3, thus destroying those. Picard comes across Renee, who is obviously dying, and what ends up happening is it turns out that it's not Renee, it's actually Talon. She had disguised herself and gave Renee the chance to kind of get loose and go on board the ship. She says, "I want to be able to watch the launch," and they actually are able to watch the launch actually happen. And Renee actually has the sailboat necklace that Talon had given her. Talon realizes that her job is done. She did everything she needed to do to protect her, and she ends up dying in Picard's arms. So we then go to Song's house, where he obviously realizes that he failed. He's watching the Europa mission going up. He hears Renee talking about this being a step for mankind. And at this exact same moment, all of a sudden his files in his computer system are being completely deleted. He finds out it's being done by Corey. He talks to Corey. Basically, she said that she is going to have her own life, and his life's work is over. He has nothing. Once they end their conversation, Song pulls out this file that says Project Con on it, and it's dated 1992 to 1996. And that's where Song's story ends. At that moment, Corey ends up getting a transmission from an unidentified person saying, "Come meet me at this place for a new future." When she goes there, she ends up meeting a stranger who turns out to be Wesley Crusher. Or as he said, the person who used to be known as Wesley Crusher. He talks about how he is a traveler through all space and time, and he basically offers Corey a choice. Just kind of have a standard existence in the 21st century, or come with him and actually be a traveler. She thinks about it briefly, and she decides to go with him, and then they go off to who knows where. At this point, the crew is back at Chateau Picard. Rios is collecting some of the communicators, the phasers of everything, just to make sure that no technology is left behind. Rafi and 7 and 9 note how happy Rios seems to be with Teresa and Ricardo. They kind of talk about what their lives are going to be like being trapped now in the 21st century. 7 and 9 kind of stops Rafi from talking about that, gives her a big kiss. And when Rafi says basically, "What was that for?" 7 and 9 just kind of stops her, smiles, and says, "Just let it simmer, just let it play out, and let it breathe," I think is the word she actually said. Picard then ends up going, he has the skeleton key from the door where he was able to let his mother out, which then led to her killing herself. He puts it in the exact same spot behind a brick where he finds it as a little kid. And Q ends up being in the solarium, or the conservatory as I've been calling it. And Q basically says to Picard that you've chosen, instead of choosing to a course path that would actually save your mom, you chose to allow history and your destiny to be fulfilled the way it is, everything with mom. And by focusing on that rather than just focusing on the need to want mom to survive, he absolved himself from the guilt of what had happened with his mother taking her life. Picard kind of asks the whole point about why all of this has been going on, and Q basically said he basically planned this because he admits to Picard that he's dying, and he's alone, and he didn't want that for Picard. So basically what that meant is that by absolving himself of his mother's guilt, which kept him from forming loving relationships and bonds with people throughout his life, now he should be able to live the rest of his life before death by allowing somebody into his life, somebody into his heart. And Picard basically says, this could have been taught without the death of Talon or Elnor. He said that Talon would have died in every timeline regardless, but this is the only one where she got to see Renee fulfill the destiny that she had been protecting. So at this point, Q says, "I only have just enough energy to be able to send all of you back to the 25th century and maybe a surprise." So they end up going and seeing the rest of the crew. They're told that Q is going to send them back. Of course, Rafi is very upset with Q because she blames Q for Elnor's death. 7 calms her down and says, "Listen to what Q has to say." So Q says he's going to return them all, and Rios surprises everybody by saying, "I'm not going back. I want to be with Teresa. I've never really had a family. This is where I belong." So the crew, especially Rafi, says goodbye to Rios and to Teresa and Ricardo, and they leave. And Q says because Rios has chosen to stay behind, he'll have enough surplus energy to provide a gift. He doesn't say what that is. Picard realizes that Q is going to die alone, and because of what he said about not wanting Picard to die alone, Picard actually gives Q a hug, to say farewell to him as he's about to die. Q says that sending them back is going to kill him. So he ends up sending them back to the Stargazer right before the ship blew up, 10 seconds before. Picard shuts off the auto-destruct. He realizes that the queen that's on board the ship, trying to take over the ship, is actually the Jurati queen, not from the main Borg collective, but from this special Borg collective that got created. And Jurati says that she's trying to take over the fleet because she needs their help. So Picard lets Jurati actually take control of the fleet. Jurati says that there is some sort of anomaly forming at the middle of the quadrant, and that she needs the entire fleet. They all need to recalibrate their shields together to actually stop this anomaly. What we find out is that Starfleet wants to know what's going on with the Stargazer, and they said that if the Stargazer does not make contact, they're going to assume the ship has been compromised. Well, Captain Picard, with Rios being gone, Picard, knowing that 7 and 9 has Borg experience, he gives a field commission to 7 and 9 to become captain of the Stargazer. And we find out that the Excelsior is not recalibrating their shields with the rest of the fleet. Musiker contacts the Excelsior, and we find out that Eleanor is on board and that he's alive, that was the gift that Q had given them. So all the ships recalibrate their shields with the Borg vessel, and they actually stop this large plume of energy coming from this anomaly. It goes against the shields for a brief period of time and finally stops. The anomaly, which has like an orangish yellow kind of color, turns blue. And 7 and 9 is not sure exactly what they just saw form, but she believes that it was the creation of a transwarp conduit, some type of conduit that they don't really know, something different. And Jurati says that it was her mission to make sure that the quadrant was protected, and she requests that her type of Borg have some sort of provisional membership in the Federation so that they can stay and watch over the anomaly, because it's believed that it's a part of some sort of grander thing that's going to be happening, and that she kind of calls herself like a guardian of the gates. And so that was allowed. What ends up happening at the end of the episode is the Stargazer returns to Earth. Picard, 7 and 9, Rafi, and Eleanor are at 10 forward with Guinan. Picard and Guinan are talking about the experiences, and she said that she's apologizing from the beginning of the season how she couldn't tell him exactly what was going to be going on, but that she wanted him to find out for himself the lesson about being able to forgive himself for his mother's death and to allow himself to love again. But she also thanked Picard from back in the past being able to tell her and recognize that there's still hope in humanity at this point. That's pretty much where the episode ends. They kind of all stay together at 10 forward. We do find out, though, from Guinan that Rios and Teresa and Ricardo were together for the rest of their lives. Teresa actually died of old age. They formed a medical cooperation called the Mariposas, and that Rios actually died in a bar fight trying to get medical supplies, and that his last breath was actually into a cigar. We also find out that Ricardo was able to help get a team together to research the alien virus or whatever that Renee found on Europa, and actually use it to save the climate issues that were going on in the 21st century and to save Earth. I guess he also stayed in contact with Renee the rest of his life, and he referred to her as Auntie Renee. So that's pretty much where the season ended. So just some thoughts that I had about this episode. Overall, I liked it. It was a satisfying ending to the season. I liked the thought of Talon giving her life for Renee, and that Renee was actually able to go up, and that Talon actually got to see this happen. So that was full scale coming forward. What was interesting is that Talon wasn't actually in all the other timelines able to see this. So based on what had happened with them being in the 21st century, the crew, and interacting with Talon, she actually got to see her mission and her life completed. I also liked the part about when Talon and Picard transported from her apartment to the Air Force base. It just kind of reminded me a lot of a nice little nod back to Assignment Earth when Gary Seven showed up at the Air Force base for the rocket launch, kind of like in this episode. So I don't know if that was done on purpose or not, but I thought whether it was or it wasn't, it was a nice callback. Let's see. Also, it was kind of the same thing with Talon appropriating the flight suit from one of the crew members of Renee's launch. Gary Seven obviously didn't do that, but in Assignment Earth, Gary Seven had his computer actually create all of these little IDs for him for different types of jobs and services. So it kind of reminded me with Talon doing that, it was kind of coming full circle with the whole Gary Seven thing. They were able to create other identities to get into places that they needed to get into. I also really enjoyed Renee and Talon interacting together at the end of the episode. And it was neat to hear how Renee always felt she had a guardian angel, and really in reality she did this whole entire time, and how Talon always wanted to be able to interact with her but really couldn't, but found little moments to actually make that happen. And so this was the culmination of Talon's life work, and that Renee actually got to see this happen. What I'm curious about is, because there was a part where Renee and Talon were talking, and then there was a skip in the story, and then Dr. Sung is coming towards Renee's chambers, and Talon disguised as Renee comes out. So I'm wondering, what did Renee and Talon, what did they talk about in between there? Did Talon finally reveal who she really was, what her role was in her life? I guess that's just going to be left nebulous and for the fans to kind of think about with their own headcanon. I really did enjoy seeing Wesley Crusher again. That was a nice little surprise. And it was nice to hear what Wesley has basically been up to. The last time he was basically seen in a talking role was in the 7th season episode Journey's End, when he got invited by the Traveler to go with him to learn to be a Traveler. But in Star Trek Nemesis, we saw Wesley Crusher in a Starfleet dress uniform at the wedding table of Riker and Troy. But Wesley in this episode said that he's been a Traveler. So are they just kind of discounting the fact that he was seen briefly in Nemesis? And I'm not even talking about the deleted scenes where he did have a couple lines. But he was seen at the table in the actual theatrical release. So did he come back to Starfleet for a little bit of time and then go back to being a Traveler? Who knows? I guess that's going to be another thing that may not get answered. But it does make me wonder, the whole thing about Corey becoming a Traveler. What was the point of that whole story? I mean, they really could have just had it that Corey deleted Dr. Sung's files and basically said, I'm just going to have a normal life, and just been gone. It wouldn't have really made a difference. But why did they have this specific thing where Corey goes with Wesley? Why was Wesley taking an interest in Corey? Is this going to be a plot thread that actually comes up in another episode of Picard for Season 3, especially with the Next Generation crew coming on board for Season 3? Or is this something that might be followed up in another series like Strange New Worlds or even Discovery? Who knows? So I thought it was a very interesting kind of story. I'm really glad, and we saw basically this was going to be happening at some point, whether Rios was going to stay behind or Teresa and Ricardo were going to go forward with him. I'm glad to see that Rios is finally going to have some peace. As we know from Season 1, he didn't have a very peaceful life. After he saw his captain kill the two synthetic androids and then kill himself, and then Rios had to help cover that up, he was a very broken, destroyed man inside, where he ended up leaving Starfleet. He started to captain the La Sirena and isolated himself with the 5 holograms of himself. You know, and then we learned this season that his dad was really not around, and he had his mother, but his mother had eventually died. So he had nobody. So he finally found the family that he always wanted and always needed. Even though he had the surrogate family with Picard and that little gang, he finally found true love and lived happily and worked to help other people with Teresa. Sad that he died in a bar fight, but it kind of sounds like something that would happen with Rios, and he died trying to get supplies to help other people. The fact that he died, his final breath went into a cigar, I thought was pretty cool. and fit the character. So I'm glad that Rios had some ending. Same thing with Dr. Girardi. I mean, we found out in season 2 that she really never felt like she belonged, and she wanted to be a part of something, and be included. And she got to have that with the Borg Queen, and together they formed this new Borg collective. It'll be very interesting to see if that story thread gets followed up on, whether it's in season 3 of Picard or in something else. Who knows? It's a very strong possibility. Well, this new anomaly that got created, we're going to find out a little bit more about it. You know, what kind of purpose does it have? And is that going to play a role in next season? Is Girardi going to come back to some degree? Let's see. The dislikes that I have about this episode, this whole issue with Corey, and I've said this in the last couple reviews about her being able to delete Soong's files and have complete access. I just think that was bullshit, sloppy writing on the fact of the writers. It's almost like they said, well, how can we figure out how Corey can get access? And they just said, fuck it, let's just let her have access and just not explain it. I've seen a few of those kind of things with Picard storytelling this season, and even in Strange New Worlds Episode 1, which I'm going to review here shortly after this video. I just thought it was sloppy. They could have come up with something, but they just kind of just threw it in there like it was nothing. So, but whatever. I was also kind of not really liking the whole inconsistency with Q's power. So at the beginning of season 2, he was actually shown, he changed himself from a young Q to an older Q. He was transporting him and Picard around. He brought the whole gang of characters all the way into this alternate timeline. But then during the season we noticed that he couldn't get into Renee's mind and change her feelings about the Europa mission. He was trying to use therapy as a way of trying to convince Renee not to go on the mission when he had just earlier on changed his mind. And that was going on before he tried to snap his fingers and change her thoughts and feelings about the mission. And then he goes and he tries to snap Guinan out of existence or vaporize her out of existence, and he wasn't able to do it then. But then all of a sudden now he's got power where he can send the crew back to the 25th century and then also get a little bit of surplus left to save Elnor. Just seemed a little odd. It's just like, did he have powers during the season or didn't he? Or because of whatever illness he had, was it kind of ebbing and flowing? I don't know. I just thought it was inconsistent, and it was just kind of like, oh, well, we need Q to have powers at this moment, so we'll make sure he has powers at this moment, but not these other moments. Again, I felt like that was a little bit sloppy. The other thing that I kind of dislike is, here we go again, another Star Trek trope, another anomaly. And there could be some sort of nefarious reason why this anomaly is here. So what, is it going to be kind of like at the end of Picard Season 1 where an anomaly opens up and this killer AI comes through? I mean, aren't we kind of anomalied out here? I mean, maybe they'll come up with something creative for it. Maybe it'll play again a role in something with Season 3 of Picard. But I hope that they, if that's the case, that they do something useful with it instead of it just being some sort of, oh, okay, we got some sort of alien presence coming through, you know? So we'll see. The other couple things that I really wanted to talk about, Project Khan, okay? So here's what I saw about that. When I looked at it, I was like, this is great, because we know from Enterprise Season 4, that whole Augment 3-part arc, that his descendant, Eric Soong, is going to be very interested and basically obsessed with genetic engineering from the eugenics wars. And he actually steals the embryos from Cold Station 12 and raises some of them while the other ones are still in cold storage. He believes that there's nothing dangerous about the augments and that they can actually remove the pieces of the augments that make them arrogant and dangerous, like Khan and his followers were. So that made a lot of sense to me. But then Strange New Worlds pilot occurs. And I haven't finished all of it yet, but what I've read and what I've seen, there is a part that's basically insinuating that the eugenics wars actually did not happen in the 90s, but it's being retconned to happen in the 2020s, around the time of the unknown, has never been discussed in Star Trek, Second American Civil War. Okay, so now they're retconning all of this. So does Project Khan mean that Khan is going to be created in the 2020s and then lead up to World War III? Or is this just a kind of a nice Easter egg that it's going to be that Khan was alive in the 90s, and that this is kind of like a plan B kind of scenario, like to continue that project, which would then lead to Eric Sung wanting to work with the Augments. I don't know. All we're going to do now is find out. I don't know if Project Khan's going to play a role in Season 3, or if there's going to be more follow-up with it in Strange New Worlds, or even Discovery. Who knows? But I'm really hoping they don't retcon that. For 55 years, it was Star Trek canon that eugenics wars happened in the 1990s, that it was Khan had seized control of over 40 nations during the 1992 to 1996 period, and that he launched on board the Botany Bay in 96 when the Augments fought with each other and Khan was overthrown. That's been consistent all the way through Star Trek lore. I don't want to see it change now just because in our real lives, the 1990s had no eugenics wars. There were people online that were saying that the eugenics wars actually didn't happen in Star Trek Voyager when they were there in the 1990s. Okay, they didn't show any eugenics war stuff going on, but they did show a model of the Botany Bay, and it's attached to the rockets. So there was a little Easter egg in there about how the eugenics wars was actually going on and how the Botany Bay actually existed. So I'm begging Star Trek's producers, please don't retcon this. Please don't do it. Okay, the eugenics wars happened in the 1990s. That's just part of Star Trek's history. It doesn't have to be a part of our real life history. So it happened in the 1990s, and then World War III happened in what, the 2030s, 2040s, 2050s, and then ended. What was it? So it would probably be around 2053, because in Star Trek First Contact it was stated that they arrived in 2063, 10 years after the Third World War. Okay? So please don't retcon that. Leave it be. Alright? The other thing that kind of really was odd to me was the whole thing about Q's death. Okay, so we figure it out that Picard, the whole point of Q sending Picard back into the past was to kind of use the memories of whatever happened with what led to his mother committing suicide, to be able to make the decision of whether or not he was going to follow with that path in his life, or was he going to change history to be able to save his mother. Well, he chose to keep history the way it was supposed to be, and so Q said that that forgave him. But isn't there some way that Q could have done this without going into the past? I mean, he was pretty violent and pretty aggressive throughout the season. It just kind of seemed to whimper out at the end. I mean, think about it. He was angry at Picard when he brought him back into the alternate timeline. At one point, he even slapped him in the face and was calling him arrogant and talking in a whole bunch of riddles about the road not taken, those kind of things. Then he's actually trying, he insinuates himself or inserts himself as Renee's therapist to try to talk her out of this mission. Then he hires Dr. Sung to try to take out Renee. But then in the end, he's all happy that everything worked out. What was the whole point of this? It just doesn't really make sense that Q was aggressively trying to stop Picard and Renee from going on this mission, but I guess I don't really know what to say. It just kind of felt sloppy at the end. That why didn't he just tell Picard, say, hey, look, I'm dying. I know that you have a lot of issues going on with the guilt that happened with your mom committing suicide. I don't want you to die alone like I'm dying alone. Let's talk about how we can resolve this. I mean, I guess talking isn't in Q's forte, and he had to have Picard have some sort of lesson to kind of figure out on his own and make the decision, is he going to find a way to save his mother, or is he just going to keep things going as planned? It just seemed, everything that we had seen about Q and how dark he was during the whole season, it just didn't seem to add up at the very end when he was like, oh, I only did this so that you wouldn't die alone. I don't know, it was just kind of bizarre. So those are my thoughts on episode 10 of season 2 of Star Trek Picard. Please feel free to leave any comments below. You can follow the show. Go to youtube.com, type in Pittsburgh's Trek Chat in the search engine, and it'll take you directly to my channel. You can also follow the show on Facebook, facebook.com /Pittsburgh's Trek Chat. You can also follow the show on Twitter at PGH Trek Chat. I'm looking forward to the next episode. Until then, may yins live long and prosper.